Programs regularly scheduled at this time have been preempted to bring you this special presentation.
Our faces, our icons, as it were, our narratives are being projected onto the Canadian canvas. I think it's exciting and marvelous.
The fact that I have a culture and a history behind me, besides my Canadian culture and society and social upbringing, I think I am special for that very reason.
It's the knowledge of being connected to traditions, to folk customs that stretch back hundreds, if not thousands of years in time, to a way of living that goes back that far in time as well, and that continues to make sense today. And that's why we continue calling ourselves Ukrainian Canadians.
At every Ukrainian Canadian festival, you'll find the male dancers as familiar as they are flamboyant. And they challenge the audience to remember that they're descended from warriors. With every step they take, they are evoking the spirit of the Cossacks. Tribesmen who fought fiercely for their independence and liberty. But even they are not the beginning of the story. The continents of Europe and Asia. Long before the Cossacks were wandering the southern steppes in the 16th century, in the heart of what is now the Soviet Union, there was the state called Kievan Rus. In 988 AD, according to tradition, a host of people assembled on the banks of the Dnipro River to be baptized into the Christian faith. Every man, woman, and child was summoned by their ruler, Prince Volodymyr, who had studied the religions of the world: Islam, Judaism, and decided that Christianity was best for his people. In that moment of history, pagan idols were struck down and the spiritual unity of the people achieved. But the golden age of Kiev was brief in the annals of time. In the following centuries, Ukrainians lost their independence along with their national boundaries. By the end of the 19th century, they had been politically regionalized, calling themselves Galicians, Ruthenians, or Bukovinians, Little Russians and Ukrainians only if they lived within the Russian Empire. To the east, they were ruled by Tsar Nicholas II, and to the west by Franz Ferdinand, head of the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire. Meanwhile, their lives remained the same as they had been for 1,000 years. Peasants enduring in abject poverty.
We worked from morning to night and were still hungry. My father had 7 children. He owned 2 acres. How was he supposed to divide that up among his children?
My mother was left alone a lot of the time. My father had to go off and serve in the Austrian army. What did their wars have to do with any of us?
You have a constant stream of invaders coming from both the east, west, and in fact from the south, from the Crimea as well. And as a consequence, I think this has bred both a conservatism within the population, a sense, almost a transcendental sense that governments really don't matter, that what's important is to survive at all costs.
Survival meant emigration to Vasily Elenyak. He and Ivan Pilipiu reached Canada September the 7th, 1891. They were the very first. but they were soon followed by others from Galicia and Bukovina, eager to leave their sorrows behind.
They had to start from scratch. But they were young, you know, and they did it. So they just came over in a boat that had cattle. I don't know, where cattle on the bottom and they were on top.
And I remember Dad's favorite story was about the people crossing on a boat from Europe to North America, and the wealthy man was, when the boat started to sink, was afraid that he was going to lose all of the gold and money he was carrying in the hold of the ship. And the chap with an education said, well, it doesn't worry me, all my wealth is up here in my brain. And that was Dad's favorite story to tell me to keep on going.
They were drawn by the offer of land, advertised by the Canadian government itself, under Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier and Minister of the Interior Clifford Sifton. It was basically Sifton's plan to open up the Northwest. Between 1891 and 1914, 170,000 Ukrainians came to Canada, most of them settling in the prairie provinces.
My parents came to Canada with 2 homemade wooden trunks. You'd be surprised how many things they packed into those trunks. There was a sickle, a scythe, an axe, all their bedding, pots, pans, spindle, wool carders, oil, seed for vegetables, hemp and poppy, everything they could carry. And they brought all their clothes. There was even enough sheepskin coats to give each of their daughters new coats when they got married years later.
It had taken considerable resources just to get this far. But they had grit and determination.
The peasants who came, contrary to most people's popular conceptions, were usually better off peasantry. They were highly educated in terms of peasants. They were courageous. They were the elite, if you like, of the peasantry itself, which had a political sense as well. And so when it came to organization, they at least could transcend the spontaneous violent reaction and organize it into something much more concrete and developed.
They were frightened, certainly, but they wouldn't give up. Traveling west on special colonist trains provided by the railway, they realized they didn't fit in with what was around them. What could they do? They'd spent almost all their money on passage to come to Canada. Nothing for it but to persevere, endure the monotonous journey, the endless stops across the country, tired and restless children wanting to get off the train. Finally, to accept what was waiting for them at the end of the line.
From one transport, around 800 people came at a time. 42 people died, among them 38 preschoolers and school children because of terrible environmental situation.
Nobody warned them of the harsh climate or difficult soil, or that the best land had already been settled by earlier immigrants. In 1896, when the first big wave of Ukrainians arrived, most of them found themselves stranded in the middle of bushland. For those who had grown up in the intimacy of the village, the isolation was terrifying.
For me, it was fascinating, this so-called pioneering era, because actually people came without any assistance, any help, and they were dumped into these forests, bushes, far from civilization.
1/4 section of unfelled timber. For $10, they filed their claim.
When it was tough, they tried to be tougher and to encounter this toughness of the day.
The next day, we drove by oxen 45 miles to my auntie, who pioneered a year before us. There we selected a homestead, dug a hole, a hole in the ground covered with sod, and there we lived for 2 winters.
The very first shelter, a dugout was all it was, fortified with lumber and sod. One small room into which the entire family crowded, and not much protection against prairie rain and snow, but it was home just the same.
My grandparents only had a bit of flour during their first winter. That was all the food they had. One of their children was sick 3 times from starvation. And then a neighbor gave them 6 potatoes to make pitohet. Nobody in the family ever forgot the pitohet made from those potatoes.
Okay, these are just about cold, so I'll have to take some more to cool.
The Cathedral of St. Ivan Suchavsky in Winnipeg, Manitoba. In the church kitchen, pitohet are made. Food, once so scarce, can now be made in abundance and sold to support the church.
I'm the cutter. I cut the potatoes. We peel 4 to 5 of these bags a day. And we have lunch here. Everybody's happy in here.
And finally, the product of so many willing hands, from recipes the pioneers brought over with them from Europe. Elizabeth Simbayuk recalls other hardships the pioneers endured.
No music then. Oh, they used to sing. These women will get together and they'll sing, but only sad songs. I think because they left their homes, left their loved ones behind, and I think that's why they sang sad songs.
The story of the pioneers has passed into community memory like a song. How the men had to go away to make money, leaving the women alone to clear the land. How the women cried from homesickness, weary of mosquitoes and hunger. How they struggled to house and feed their children, relying on what nature could provide when they had nothing else.
My mother baked in an outdoor oven. She cut logs, did everything. And that summer, she had her 9th child. My father had to be away a lot, but he was there to see it. What they longed for, a rich field of grain.
My dad went down to harvest in Gretna. He needed money. Mom stayed at home, done the hay, and he had to go down to there, and he worked in the harvest time. Then he seen this rake, 1-horse rake, you know. So he said, how about selling me that? When Dad finished there, the farmer gave him a bonus of 1 hen. Made a little box on that rake, you know. And my dad pulled that rake from Gretna through Emerson to Tolstoy. Hardly any roads, just Indian trails, you know. And about halfway, all of a sudden, there was a commotion in the box. The hen laid an egg, you know. And Dad said that was the greatest thing. We are going to have our own egg. Because they had nothing. When they came here, it was nothing, you know. And then he pulled that rake 50 miles.
It was sheer determination for a man to pull a rake behind him while he walked the 50 miles back home. After maybe 2 years' hard labor, home had become a place the family could take pride in. With its neat, whitewashed walls, its furniture, its thatched roof. It was a perfect replica of a Ukrainian village house, built by their own hands. The dugout was now a chicken coop, but the new house was still small.
Well, it was very crowded. We had a 2-room house, and my grandparents slept in the kitchen, and my parents, my brother, my sister, and I slept in the living room, so that, you know, it was always crowded. As a result, one of the great thrills in the early spring was as soon as possible, my brother and I would move out into one of the granaries, which by then would be empty of wheat. And for a period of, let's say, May to late September, we bunked in a granary. So you had a great deal more room. So there was that kind of tightness, which in a way sort of pushed one to spend one's time outdoors.
People gathered, they never went anywhere without taking children. It's not like today, you scout around for a babysitter and you leave the kids and then you're off on your own caprice, as it were. With them, it was, you took the kids everywhere, and if they were going to stay a little later, you put the kids to bed, and it was time to go home, you got them up, and got them dressed, and you took them home. So it was there was always a great, great sense of family there.
Trimbola, Manitoba, where April the 12th, 1897, the first Ukrainian Catholic Mass was celebrated in Canada for the original 15 families of the settlers in the area. Today, people bring their families to this historic site, gathering at picnics, just as they used to in the past, in touch with a dream. It's the same kind of impulse that inspired the art of Ukrainian-Canadian painter William Kurelak, who died in 1977. He too wanted to pay respect to his roots. In his case, by depicting the world in which he'd grown up. His watercolors are a lyrical tribute to the patience of the early settlers, to their skills in building roads, tilling acres of unwilling ground, until their enterprise was successful and they established a lasting place for themselves. But these days, it's actually possible to journey back to earlier times through a unique project near Edmonton, Alberta, the Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village. Here, historians, scientists, and art experts have come together to help create a working model of a 1920s Ukrainian settlement.
Is Cameron here?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he's with Irene right now. Anyway, he's the one that looks after the gardening and things. So
9
anyway,
a.m.,
what we're gonna start doing
a briefing of the staff. Most of the people in this room are the descendants of homesteaders, and they're about to play the part of their ancestors. The idea is to involve the visitor in a kind of living history, a step back into an earlier decade of this century. This is the house of Ivan Pilipiu, and this is Annie, the servant in the household. She's 18 years old, and she's working as a domestic for the family to pay the cost of her passage. The Pilipius have paid Annie's way over from Europe. Mrs. Pilipiu can use her help. The two women don't have to speak English in the village, but they'll answer questions as best they can. What have they been discussing?
Stena, she asked if I'd be help her holubці make to say що but I other things have do також, but sluhe they coming in 1 o'clock, they eating dinner, there a lot of food needing make. They're a little bit time, but back with it in oven to.
They're making holubці. The illusion is complete, even to the actual preparation of a meal. Mrs. Pilipiu still finds time to greet visitors to her home.
Oh, добрий день. Як ви сьогодні? Oh, how you be today? Come in house. You like to see house?
A lot of the people coming in through here are very apologetic when they walk through the door because they think that we live here, and they feel rather uncomfortable barging into somebody else's house.
Their accent has been practiced till it's foolproof.
It was really hard because a Ukrainian accent I always found very difficult, and so I was really paranoid about learning how to do it when I started working here. But Rose did it just so well that after I heard her speaking like that for a day, then it was a piece of cake.
Let's see Rose trying to do a Ukrainian accent.
Oh, that's...
Well, actually, she just spoke, and I listened, and that's just picked it up like that.
It's a pattern in reverse of the original occupants of the house, who found learning English no easy matter.
Just anything? Oh, how be you?
Oh, I be fine, and how you be?
Oh, dobre, dobre.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Between 1925 and 1935, another 60,000 Ukrainian immigrants arrived in Canada. But they came to a happier, more settled situation out west. There was even a first generation that could call itself Ukrainian Canadian and had adapted to the conditions of the New World. These buildings have been brought here from East Central Alberta, from their original sites. They are being carefully restored and furnished through the analysis and work of archivists, who are duplicating everything from the labels on boxes to the intricate detailing on a picture frame, in order to give a true representation of over half a century ago.
There is a saying in Ukrainian, "Chim chata bohata tim rada," which means that which the home has, it is happy to share. And that, I think, as far as the Ukrainian Canadian community, describes the essence of the spirit of being a Ukrainian Canadian, of sharing that what we have with others.
Northwest of Winnipeg, Dauphin, Manitoba, where the National Ukrainian Festival has taken place since the 1960s. Every summer, thousands of people from all over Canada and the United States come to Dauphin, site of one of the first pioneer settlements, to enjoy parades and bands, ensemble folk culture as it has been interpreted in North America. At the huge festival grounds, booths and stalls demonstrate all kinds of traditional arts and crafts. But they're not the only attraction around. Do you want to learn about your family's village back in Ukraine?
We're researching your village in the Ternopil area, right in there, on the detailed map.
You can, with the help of an archivist there on the spot. And you can also try your hand on the tsimbali. Everyone knows it takes years to play this dulcimer-like instrument. Brought over to North America by the first settlers, it is still played and enjoyed. Then there are the dancers in the grandstand. At this moment, the stunning Rusalka Dance Ensemble, based in Winnipeg. Now so much an integral aspect of Ukrainian Canadian life, folk dancing wasn't always so. It had to be encouraged and developed in the 1920s, when classes began, along with public performances. The dancing instilled a pride in costume and a joy in exuberant self-expression. The dance companies came into being in this country in the 1950s and 60s, and their popularity has increased. Working out of community centers, church basements, and school gymnasiums, they are amateur dancers, keeping alive a vital folk art. Many of the troupe have been to Ukraine, and for an audience, they provide a powerful connection.
Here at a festival like the Dolphin Ukrainian Festival, where you do see Ukrainian Canadiana come to life, what we're seeing is basically a synthesis between the Ukrainian experience and the Canadian experience. It's not something separate, it's something that comes together within the individual, and it's the way we live our lives on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, that's the wedding, that's a korovai. And so is this a And that one too, that's a korovai. Yeah, a traditional wedding bread. Yeah, that's beautiful. Isn't that beautiful work? Oh, yeah.
The art of making bread, it's almost as old as Ukraine itself. And the sharing of bread is a time-honored custom.
With bread, I mean, it's the staff of life. And because they worked hard for it in this country, and I guess in the homeland, you didn't knock it around. It was very special.
To the point where when I was a child, if you dropped a piece of bread, you had to pick it up and kiss it.
I know a priest, for instance, who is absolutely fanatical about bread. And I mean, and if a piece of bread falls off the table, he'll pick it up and kiss it. His wife has to throw out very old, moldy bread because he will eat it, because it's sinful to throw away bread.
The korovai, or wedding bread. Nowhere is the social importance of bread revealed more elegantly than in the making of it. The korovai is the community's wish for a good life. After the loaf is baked, friends of the bride decorate it with elaborate symbolism. For fertility, pine cones and doves, symbolizing peace, love, and faithfulness, each drawn from nature and fashioned from the dough. Ukraine was known as the breadbasket of Europe, and the soil produced grain in abundance. So it's not surprising that Ukrainians learned to bake bread that signified every important event. Easter and Christmas bread, the round and braided kolach that is also presented with salt as a greeting to guests. But in Canada, the dove has inaugurated a new tradition. Little individual doves are made to be handed out to the wedding guests. When the korovai is topped with wheat sheaves and proudly set out on display, the little doves are placed beside it on a tray. The happiness and good wishes are shared all around.
When my older sister was married, the women got together and baked the wedding bread. They talked and sang as they worked. I was 18 years old when I was married. We had 10 children. 4 died. Thanks to God, 6 are still alive.
Weddings might have been festive occasions in earlier times, but the survival of the children provided an even greater cause for rejoicing. These are student teachers in Saskatchewan in 1921, all of them Ukrainian Canadian. They would ensure the children a brighter future.
Well, the teachers spoke Ukrainian and English. They'd say this is an apple in Ukrainian and then say it's an apple in English. And the book knishka, and a book, and so on, item by item, which I think if I recall, the nouns were the first thing. And then they would take action words, run, football. It was a tough job because you were the only one. All your homework had to be planned, and you started about 8 o'clock, filled the blackboards with homework, seat work, and if you had a Eaton's catalog somewhere, that was the big display. It's the only thing you could have. There was no teacher's aids or publications of any sense. You had a cow grazing, and then you'd put it on the board, write me a story, what the cow was doing and what it produces and so on. And you can attend that from grade 1 to even grade 8.
They were the children of parents whose first language was Ukrainian. But gradually they were being forced to speak English.
My parents spoke very little English even up to the time that my father died. My mother's still alive and still speaks very little English. So Ukrainian was used in the home exclusively, but in school we were absolutely forbidden to use it. So even during recess, people like I, who came in knowing very little English in grade 1, were still required to use English. One could not switch to Ukrainian if one were caught. It was not severe, but it was clearly discouraged.
Well, I taught Ukrainian to the girls, and the punishment was I had to run around the school 3 times, and 2 boys with a switch ran after me.
What had happened was that the one-room schoolhouse had ceased to be bilingual. In Alberta by 1913, Manitoba 1916, and Saskatchewan 2 years later. In the effort to anglicize, language was the obvious target. It's been left to the present generation to reform the educational thinking of the past. St. Demetrius Catholic School in Toronto. The children are taught equally in English and Ukrainian.
Ми питаємо, хто це чи що це? Пані Дяковська мусить дещо змінити. Бо я питала, хто це? Це песик. Хто це? Це мишка. Хто це? Це котик.
Bilingualism is once again popular in Canada. In Alberta and Manitoba, where many Ukrainian Canadians continue to live, a child can pass through the public school system and be educated in English, French, and Ukrainian.
Хоче бути відьма? Ні. Адріанче? Добре, тільки гарно співай. Прошу.
It's something the pioneers would have given anything to see. Opportunity for education of any kind was denied most of them in the Old World. As late as 1900, 80% of them were illiterate.
I think because Ukrainians were downtrodden for most of their nation's life, because it was either Poles or Russians or somebody that was in control of them, I think that brought them together in a closer way. And that also created poets and nationalists that gave Ukrainians strength.
To retain the language is to retain the culture, because the language is the essence of the culture. Others will say, no, that is not the essence. As long as you feel inside that you are Ukrainian, as long as you can dance and sing and understand the words, it's not necessary to speak it. I have not resolved that problem for myself as such, but my gut feeling is, and this is something that has been given to me by my parents, is that without the language, you're not Ukrainian. If you have the language, you are.
I'll glorify the mute, downtrodden slaves, and as a sentinel over them, I'll place the mighty word.
So wrote the great 19th century Ukrainian poet, Taras Shevchenko.
Seek enlightenment, my brothers. Read, and reading, think.
Trident Press in Winnipeg. It's been publishing newspapers and books in Ukrainian since before the First World War. Language is an instrument of enlightenment.
My mother used to read Shevchenko when my sister and I were washing dishes. That was sort of to pacify us. And one of the poems that she read that we loved was Katerina. It is about a young Ukrainian village girl who falls in love with a Russian soldier who comes to the village. And of course she has a child, he leaves her, it's very sad. By the time we finish dishes we would be crying, etc. But it begins something like this. Кохайтеся, чорнобреві, та не з москалями.
Don't fall in love with a Muscovite. He will trifle with you and leave you in the end to return to his Moscow homeland.
Піде в свою Московщину, а дівчина гине.
Taras Shevchenko, a former serf, who resisted both the Poles and the Russians. He is a hero to all Ukrainians. And he is not the only writer to remind Ukrainians of their complex history. Lesia Ukrainka, feminist and poet, is also a witness to the national struggles, reinforcing the idea of a spirit that prevails, transcending geographical barriers.
Every immigrant, in a way, would like to start a new life. In the Ukrainian case, I think they would have forgotten about their history if they could have, but they were always reminded of it, both in Canada and what was going on in Ukraine. After all, the greatest cataclysmic event of the 20th century, one of the greatest was the revolution in Russia and in Ukraine, and that shaped their consciousness as much as anything else.
In 1917, when the Russian Revolution broke out at what was then Petersburg, Ukrainians seized the opportunity to undertake their own struggle for freedom. A Ukrainian revolution. It began as a demand for autonomy. By November of that year, 1917, in the historic city of Kyiv, a proclamation was issued for a Ukrainian republic. But it wasn't long before the Ukrainians found themselves fighting against the Bolsheviks, locked in a life-or-death struggle for the republic that had just been born. Once again in November 1921, the matter was decided. The last battle was lost, and it was all over. The Ukrainian national anthem continues to be sung, and the hope for a nation continues to live.
Ukraine has not died, as freedom cannot die. Be hopeful, valiant brothers, our glory will revive.
Радіостанцію CKJS на 810-й хвилі. Година вже є 12 по 7, і зараз ми почуємо ще одну пісню. Ukrainian popular radio in the prairies, broadcasting to a large local audience and presenting everything from Ukrainian folk to country and western music. Почуємо пісню у виконанні хору імені Вірйовки. Це пісня «Ой гарна я гарна». It's a perfect example of the influence of Canadian style on ethnic programming, keeping the language and identity current. What drives Ukrainian Canadians to maintain their separate identity? It may be because the emotional ties to the homeland are as intense and dynamic as ever. Here the dancers perform a mountain dance from the Carpathians.
it's very difficult, I think, to be a Ukrainian and not to be religious. I mean, be Catholic, Orthodox, or whatever. Because of, let's say, our agricultural roots and everything that a Ukrainian, for example, everything that a Ukrainian sees, he blesses. It's part and parcel of being Ukrainians to be religious as well. I mean, you take our services, you take the many services that we have which bless events and celebrate nature. And so we bring the Christian perspective to this.
A Ukrainian Orthodox wedding in which the bride and groom are crowned king and queen, sharing God's glory. They are presented with a sacred picture, an icon, that will always remind them of the day and the ritual of marriage itself. Icons have been an essential part of Eastern Christian ritual for centuries. The very act of representation is sacramental, the holy image an incarnation, bringing heaven and earth together. Though the style of icon painting has remained unchanged, the icon painter certainly has, at least in Canada. Vera Senchuk is that rarest of beings, a woman icon painter, who paints icons in her attic studio.
I remember the exact day that the idea of painting icons came to me. I was, I believe, 18 years old and a camp counselor at a Ukrainian children's camp in Wadena, Saskatchewan, Zalani High. And I had been walking outside. I had a free period, and the beautiful sunny day, and the idea came to me, can women paint icons? But it wasn't until we moved here to Winnipeg that a friend of mine knew of an elderly man who had studied iconography in Ukraine, and he said, why don't you meet him? I brought my drawings, and we went to see Mr. Dmytro Bartoshuk. He looked at my drawings, and he said, yes, you'll paint. And he was a wonderful man, very encouraging, very warm, an excellent teacher. And he said, always said to me, whatever I know, I'll tell you. I'll pass it on to you. I'll pass it on to you. The power is, it's a spiritual thing. The icon, it's an image. You can recognize the figures as having human form, but in iconography you try and paint the spiritual element. When I paint, I don't necessarily think of myself as a woman or a man. I paint with prayer and hope that, and pray that they are the way they are supposed to be.
Nothing is more typical of the culture and at the same time more religious in interpretation than Easter eggs. The story goes that the Virgin Mary decorated pisanki and took them to Pontius Pilate in an attempt to save her son's life. In actual fact, egg decorating dates back to pagan times. Melted beeswax is applied to the egg with a kistka that has a needle point to draw delicate lines. The egg is also submitted to successive dye baths: yellow, orange, red, and even black, until the egg is finished in design, a remarkable harmony of color and significance.
We praise God in the Trinity that this temple will be a reminder to our descendants that their fathers raised this building with much hardship in order that they might honor God and lift up their prayers to Him for their forebears, the founding fathers of this temple, as long as it remains on this spot.
The church, a monument to the importance in Ukrainian Canadian life, Orthodox or Ukrainian Catholic.
Our church, we feel, is very rich in theology, culture, mysticism, and after Vatican II, there was a tendency to imitate the Western Church in simplification, making various changes, but this quickly stopped when we realized what a tremendous wealth we had in the church, and to change anything was really to destroy it. Theology was very highly developed in the East, long before it was in the West.
In Edmonton, Alberta, St. Joseph's Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral. Though affiliated with Rome, Ukrainian Catholics look to the East and Byzantine Rite for their worship. And so this beautiful building is decorated in the Eastern style, with murals and frescoes depicting the life of Christ, his mother and the apostles. Here too is the trident, the ancient national symbol of Ukraine, as a background for Saint Volodymyr, who first brought Christianity to the people.
It's the love of our culture, our faith. I think it's very important that we pass on to our children, and not to be embarrassed by your background. Because we did, as Ukrainians, go through a very hard time in the beginning of the century of this embarrassment of being Ukrainians, coming to a new land, people not accepting us. But now, I think we've passed that period, and now it's, like they say, it's fun to be Ukrainian, it's fun to be whatever ethnic background you are.
I'm very proud of the fact that I said, if democracy works, I've got an opportunity. I became an alderman as a result. My father was very proud of that. He thought that here was an achievement in life, and that was in 1944. And then I said I was going around for mayor. Well, everyone said, you'll never get in. You're of Ukrainian origin. I said, what does that mean? Well, there's no one in Canada that's ever been elected as mayor of any city. I said, well, we have to test democracy, see if it works. And I did, and I won. And then I was elected to Parliament. I remember when I was Minister of Labor, and I was walking out of the main entrance of the Parliament buildings. I looked at the sky and I said, looks like rain, and the RCMP constable who was on duty at the time said, no, I don't think so, sir. I said, well, I hope you're right. And I started to walk down the steps, and he said, just a minute. I said, yes. And he said, are you Mr. Starr? I said, yes. He says, I'm Ukrainian, too.
Mike Starr served under John Diefenbaker. Nothing prevented his rise to power, but it wasn't always that way. When the First World War began in 1914, and the troops boarded trains and shipped off to Europe, Canada was seized by a distrust of the foreigner in its midst. Soon enough, the soldiers found themselves living in the trenches and battling the enemy. While back home, 5,000 Ukrainians were interned in camps. They were carrying Austro-Hungarian passports.
And some people suffered in detentions quite a bit. And of course, it left some mark on some of them, because they always, in memoirs, said, well, we worked hard, we tried to educate our people, we tried build a new country from forest, started new fields of wheat and so forth. And we were treated so badly.
It didn't matter that 10,000 served, or that one of them Philip Konoval was awarded the Victoria Cross for valor. When the war was over, the troops came home. The prejudice continued.
People who had the qualifications for certain jobs did not get those jobs because of their names. A ski or a chuck on the end of your name quite often guaranteed that you weren't going to get that job regardless of your qualifications. The Ukrainians were the first to be fired, and they were the last to be hired.
And when they were lucky enough to get a job, it was on a railway gang, often for inadequate wages.
Many in my generation, the first native born of immigrant families, quite often changed names because they wanted to avoid having their name used as an identity of something that was less than equal. Others changed their names for reasons of work. For instance, my name has changed. My name is not Sego. My name is Saramaga. But I didn't change it. An Anglo-Saxon changed it for me.
Almost from the time the newcomers arrived, it had been a goal of both the provincial and federal governments to rid them of their old world habits and allegiances, somehow to turn them into a brand of Anglo-Canadian. But in spite of certain obvious outward signs, the assimilation was never complete. Ukrainian Canadians held on to their traditions and began to adapt elements to the Canadian milieu. They achieved a synthesis, but there was a cost. Forced to straddle two realities, the community remained more inner than outward looking, drawing support from its own, defensive and always resisting integration. To have done less would have meant losing touch with themselves.
They had a happy life. They built their own churches, they built their own halls, and they lived in that environment continuously day after day. Weekends was spent at the hall and the church, and so were the children all there. And it was a big family affair, actually, every Saturday. But the wrong thing about it as the years went by was, in my opinion, that they had built a sort of an invisible fence around themselves. It was sort of they were in the ghetto, and they were all just Ukrainians in Canada trying to live up to the laws of the country, but not participating in the life of the community.
I think it's defensive for several reasons. One is that, again, it goes back historically to the sense of being surrounded by enemies. It's also defensive within the Canadian context because the Ukrainians were never accepted as Canadians of Ukrainian background. They're always seen as second or third class citizens, as much as we also too look at peasants and farmers as not being quite up to our conception of, say, an urban Toronto, or my conception of being an urban Toronto dweller.
Just who were these second and third class citizens anyway? In the 20s, many of them were no longer farmers. They were city dwellers in a variety of occupations. But they continued to suffer discrimination right into the 30s and through the Depression. And it wasn't until the Second World War, when Ukrainian Canadians joined up in record numbers, that they had a chance to change attitudes towards them forever.
Things changed after World War II because you couldn't maintain a situation of attacking people with foreign names, people of foreign parentage, and at the same time pay tribute to them for volunteering to fight for their country and being prepared to lay their lives down.
Everything, it seemed, was altered by the end of the Second World War, including the map of Europe. People displaced by war were looking for a home.
After the Second World War, those people who found themselves in displaced persons camps in Germany, for example, were people who had the opportunity, not as my parents did and others, to go to higher education. to be able to develop their talents in music and in writings and dancing, etc., or whatever. They came here and they brought that with them, so that the Ukrainian situation, I think, revitalized itself with a higher level of culture.
Between 1947 and 1953, over 30,000 more Ukrainians emigrated to Canada. They were a new breed, and among them, Peter Savarin. He was prepared for anything.
Well, I had to work, and at first I worked as a laborer, including digging ditches. But then a good man saw me working hard, all in sweat. He said, "Why don't you join the Carpenters Union?" And I said, "But I don't know anything about carpentry." He says, "Well, you will learn, you are a smart man." So I signed up as a carpenter.
That carpenter finished by taking a law degree and becoming Chancellor of the University of Alberta. He brought industry, courage, and intellect to his new career.
Most important thing in life, to be useful to your community, to your family, to your country, to humanity at large. To be simply a good human being.
Though the majority of Ukrainians settled in the prairies, now, after nearly a century of immigration, their presence can be found from coast to coast in Canada. Their images are familiar to us today, in paintings by Ukrainian-Canadian artists who have entered the mainstream of culture. Their labors have been recognized as fundamental to the pioneering history of this country. They broke open much of the prairies. They are part of the Canadian scene, even as they help to shape it, planting, as they used to say, an island of domestic life in the wilderness. Today, they can take pride in everything that's been accomplished, in being Ukrainian-Canadian.
Each immigration that came had a very different psychology. It's something that Ukrainians here have always had a hard time digesting new immigrants, because they relate to an image of the old country that is past already. I mean, the Soviet Ukraine today is a very different place than it was in 1945 when the last immigration came. And so when new immigrants come today, they are really strange birds in many ways. They think differently. Their understanding of what it is to be Ukrainian is even different. This has been true of every immigration, that the pioneer immigration, for instance, was not very well educated, had a low level of Ukrainian consciousness, and it was basically agricultural. The interwar immigration already had a much more refined political identity, and they were much more active in Ukrainian nationalist politics and socialist politics. The post-World War II immigration, of course, had a very strongly anti-Soviet character.
The difference between Ukrainians in Canada and the United States is that the ones in the United States do not have this feeling of, we were first, we made this land. And then they're just numbers. The United States, they are nothing in comparison to the total majority. And, of course, a major difference is the political makeup of the country. We are professed to be, and I think now finally doing something about it, we are multicultural. The United States is not. Although they've given up on the so-called melting pot, they've given up quite late. Most people have been melted.
What does it mean to be multicultural in Canada? That people of different backgrounds can retain their uniqueness. It's taken 100 years to bring that about, but at last, difference is to be respected. And each successive wave of Ukrainian immigrants has helped to realize it by insisting on the value of the past, the validity of memory, in effect. In Toronto, at the St. Demetrius Svitlytsia picnic, Father Terry Lozinski leads senior members of the parish in the singing of an old song. It's just the kind of song they would have sung long ago in the community halls, the Narodni Domy, where the community gathered not only to sing, but to gossip and dance, and to watch plays. The actors were selected from among themselves: farmers, construction workers, miners, housewives.
We had plays, and everyone was expected to act a part. If I had a good part given to me now, I'd still like to do it. If I could take the script home and read it once, I could do it all again.
Drama entered the bloodstream, and it's still there. Actress Luba Goy comes by it naturally.
Well, my father, who was a playwright, poet, musician, singer, brought back a lot of traditional plays from Ukraine, which were performed on Saturday nights in the local church basement. And of course, the stage was very important. We loved to go Saturday nights and see these wonderful old comedies. And the tradition was the minute you could speak, you were bunged up on the stage and you had to memorize pages of poetry. And it was second nature.
The name of my poem is What's in a Name by William Shakespeare. What's in a name? That which we call,
Rose, speak up, girl. What's the matter? Don't you speak English? Or maybe you think you're a little star.
No, sir. Mr. Teacher, sir, I'm Daria.
Diarrhea? What kind of a crazy name is that?
It's Daria, sir. Daria Karpiak.
I see, and are you a car park?
No, sir. I'm Ukrainian.
Well, you're in Canada now. You should have a Canadian name.
Hi, Natalka, guess what? I've decided to change my name. Ready for this? From Daria Karpiak to Darlene Carp. I know it's a fish. Better than being Diarrhea Car Park the rest of my life. Mama, we've decided to name the baby Dylan. Dylan. Dylan? Daria, what is Durila? Mama, it's not crazy. It's Welsh. And it's the name of a very famous rock and roll singer today, Bob Dylan. Yeah. Ти роки ролі бітники з гітарами. Боже, чого ж ти мене караєш? God's not punishing you, Mama. Ну, чи він хоч наш, цей Bob Dylan? Come on, Mama, Bob Dylan's not Ukrainian, he's Jewish. Ой, Боже. Ну, чи що ж люди в церкві будуть говорити? Ну, то буде сміятися з мене на галі. Mama, nobody at church is gonna laugh. Besides, what do you care what those people in the community think? Ну, то назви його Ярослав. Ярослав по татові, ти була його найкраща дитиночка. His favorite, Mama, I'm his only child. Besides, Brian and I think that Dylan is... Так, я, ти і Брайан. А про мене не думайте, окей? Я піду в old age home, і я не буду знати свого внучка Ярослава. The baby's name is Dylan, damn it. То окей? Робіть, що хочете. Тільки справляйте хрестини без мене. Okay, Mama, okay. Now, how about Dylan Yaroslav? Come on, Mama, you've got to come to the christening. Name of my poem is What's in a Name by William Shakespeare. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell. Mom, I'm scared. Dylan, honey, you've got nothing to be afraid of. You're going to be terrific. Besides, Mummy will be backstage the whole time. Okay, Dylan? Yeah, okay. But, Mom, when I go out to say my poem, I don't want the man to call me Dylan. I want him to call me Yaroslav.
Winnipeg, the Ukrainian Cultural and Educational Center. Now there's an awareness that the heritage must be preserved, with the expertise that only museum and art curators can provide. Everyday objects and prized possessions are meticulously stored so that the future can see and understand. A culture is not merely the sum of its pages in a history book.
I look at every item as the product of somebody's imagination, the product of somebody's life. I think of in terms of how that person feels, how it could be 2 scraps of paper, but those 2 scraps of paper could tell a story about something that Ukrainians were doing, or it could be 20 boxes which will tell that same story.
Even ordinary snapshots are not overlooked.
Very often people ask, what's the value of maintaining one's heritage? I mean, after all, we live in Canada and we should all be Canadians. And I find that a very a narrow type of an approach, as I think many Ukrainians would find, because I think that the more that one can put into one's soul, the more content, if you will, the richer you are and the richer your country is. I like to think of it this way. If in a society like Canada, Chinese culture can flourish alongside Ukrainian and Jewish and French and English and Scottish and what have you, and people can live in harmony and learn from one another, we as individuals become so much richer.
There is a sense of pride that has come forward in the last 10 or 15 years, in part motivated by developments such as multiculturalism and government policy, but also, I think, simply indigenous to a new generation that is coming forward, that no longer has a sense of, the sense of oppression that the generation of the 30s and the generation of the 20s experienced.
My generation names itself ethnic. I mean, I have the power to call myself that. So that, to me, that's not a ghetto, that's not being walled in, it's a community which I've chosen to be a member of, and I feel a sense of solidarity with. It's part of my identity, my sense of self as a writer and as a Canadian.
It's the present generation's prerogative to assert its Ukrainian-Canadian ancestry with added vigor and sophistication. For example, as the sense of self has grown, so has the professionalism of Ukrainian-Canadian dancing.
Ukrainian dancing has become a very exciting art form, and you find more and more kids are excited about the culture. It has become very much a stage show where it's not just isolated to the Ukrainian community. You'll get people from all different cultural backgrounds coming to see Ukrainian dancing. It's a heck of a workout. The dancers that come here, you could see they're in very good shape. There's been a large influence of ballet and modern dance in Ukrainian dancing over the last, say, 15, 20 years.
Today there are choreographers of the dance, but its integrity must remain inviolate.
I found that Ukrainian dance is my way of interpreting my culture, and it was the vehicle with which I could best express it. I'm very, very in love with being, or I shouldn't say that, I'm very proud of being a Canadian, but I'm also equally as proud to be Ukrainian as well.
If folk culture means simply of the people, the Ukrainian-Canadian culture is still that. Its roots are popular, but by no stretch of the imagination can it be called primitive. It has evolved and is confident enough to satirize itself. Take the work of Toronto artist Natalka Hussar. She selects everyday objects and myths of the community and turns them into art.
This is called Our Lady of Mississauga. And I painted myself as if I was an icon with all the trappings of an icon. And it's painted sort of in Byzantine pop style. So I'm in a full-length black mink coat, like going to church, right, with this sort of Cossack-style headdress and a designer bag. And the shoes are outside of me because they're just for show. And I'm holding this half baby, half husband, a little husband, who's the accountant type. A husband that you would show off. And all these normal, nice Ukrainian girls applauding, sort of like cherubs. And the Cadillac driving up for pickup. And the dinette set with an Easter egg packaged inside. It's every young girl's dream. And the diamond is the center of the painting. It's a painting of what would happen if I had it all, if all my dreams came true, God forbid.
Some Ukrainian Canadian artists are saying that irony is not an enemy to be feared, that respectability and middle-class complacency may be.
I think now, because the Ukrainian population, having been here almost 100 years, you see an emergence, kind of transitional community from a working class and peasant or farmer background to a much more middle-class society where, of course, high culture breeds and is well accepted within that context. And that's exactly what's happening, and that's why you find Ukrainians are particularly sensitive, where those within the middle class or those within the urban centers, very conscious of the image that Ukrainians portray to their fellow Canadians and the way they are treated in Canadian society.
What I'm most thrilled with is that in Canada, we're finally doing things the way I think we should have been doing it all along. It is that we're doing it through the mainstream society. It's fine that we did our own Saturday schools. It's fine that we did built our own churches and so forth. But we are part of the Canadian society. We are part of the Canadian culture as such. And I think it is just fitting and right that Canadian should accept this as part of its culture in a multicultural Canada and support it. And what thrills me is that, in fact, it doesn't seem strange for the government of Saskatchewan to fund the second volume of the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, the government of Manitoba to fund the third volume of the Encyclopedia of Ukraine. So, in other words, finally, I think, after almost 100 years of our presence in Canada, we are part of the Canadian sort of social fabric.
Being Ukrainian for me is being different from somebody else in another part of Canada. Everybody has their own experiences, and I think that is what makes Ukrainians in Canada. Those varied experiences, the beautiful experiences, the sad experiences, the magnificent achievements, the magnificent failures. All of these stories make up the entire story, and I think to understand the community, you have to know those stories to know the real Ukrainian soul.
Today in Canada, there are almost 800,000 Canadians of Ukrainian descent, living, working, accepted. They have not only survived, they have triumphed.
There's more to see on SCN, the Saskatchewan Communications Network.